Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are opening up a topic that, quite honestly, is probably sitting in your bathroom cabinet right now.
Oh, for sure.
It might be hiding in your gym bag, or maybe it's sitting front and center on your dresser. It is a name that feels incredibly familiar almost, like it's part of the wallpaper of our lives.
It really is.
You see it, you recognize it, but you probably don't think about it.
It is absolutely ubiquitous. You see it in every airport duty-free shop, from Heathrow to Hong Kong, every high-end department store, from Saks to Harrods. And this is the important part. It is increasingly dominating your social media feeds, whether you realize it or not.
We are talking about the Estée Lauder Companies, and I have to be honest, before digging into this massive stack of research, I just thought of it as, well, a brand.
Just Estée Lauder.
Exactly, Estée Lauder. The perfume your mom wore, or maybe that distinct little brown bottle of advanced night repair serum. But looking at the sheer scale of this operation, calling it a brand is a massive understatement. It is a behemoth.
It really, really is. It's so easy to mistake the name on the bottle for the entirety of the business. But the Estée Lauder Companies, or ELC, as it's known in the financial world and the industry, is actually a massive corporate infrastructure that essentially shapes the global prestige beauty industry.
Shapes it.
We aren't just talking about one line of lipstick here. We are talking about the second largest cosmetics company in the world, sitting right behind L'Oreal.
Okay, let's unpack this immediately because the scale here is kind of mind-blowing. When we say second largest, what are we actually looking at in terms of the numbers? Because the research here points to some dizzying figures for the fiscal year 2025.
Right. So to give you the headline numbers first, as of fiscal year 2025, the company reported revenue of $14.3 billion.
$14.3 billion.
Billion, with a B. They are sitting on total assets worth $19.9 billion. That is a massive financial footprint. They employ roughly 57,000 people globally. But, and this is crucial for our analysis today, sheer size doesn't insulate you from volatility.
That's the hook, isn't it? Because looking at these reports, despite that massive $14 billion revenue, everything isn't exactly perfect in Canada.
No, it's not. And that's the central tension of our deep dive today. While they pulled in massive revenue, they actually posted a net loss of $1.1 billion in 2025.
Wait, let me just pause you there. A $1.1 billion loss on $14 billion in revenue, that is a significant disconnect. How does a company selling that much product end up in the red by $1 billion?
It is a stark contrast, and it signals that we are looking at a company in a very, very painful transition. We are seeing a legacy giant that generates massive sales, but is facing significant profitability challenges, structural overhead issues, and a changing consumer landscape that they are, frankly, frantically trying to adapt to.
It's a giant ship trying to make a very sharp turn.
It's a very complex moment for them, yeah.
Which makes this the perfect time to explore their story. Our mission today is to figure out how a husband and wife team in 1946 transformed 4 Symbol skin creams into a global empire that now owns everything, from Tom Ford to The Ordinary. And more importantly, we need to understand how they are navigating this turbulent economic landscape in 2026.
Exactly. It's a story of legacy versus modernity. It's about how a company built on the high-touch service of department store counters survives and attempts to thrive in the age of algorithmic feeds and AI.
And just to set the stage for the listener who might not realize just how much this company owns, it's not just the name Estée Lauder on the door either.
Well, far from it. That's the empire aspect we need to grasp. The portfolio is incredibly vast and strategically segmented.
Right.
You have the powerhouse makeup brands like Emmy Cosmetics, which basically defined artistry in the 90s. You have the clinical skincare giants like Clinique.
Everyone knows Clinique.
Everyone knows Clinique. You have the ultra-luxury tier with La Mer. You have the niche fragrance houses like Jo Malone London and Le Labo. You have hair care with Aveda and Bumble. And of course, the massive recent acquisition of the Tom Ford brand.
It's like the Avengers of the beauty world. They've just assembled every heavy hitter under one roof.
That's a really good analogy.
Yeah.
And physically, while they're headquartered in the General Motors building in Midtown Manhattan, which feels very classic, old-school New York luxury, their footprint is truly global. They actually opened a massive high-tech distribution center in Galgen in Switzerland back in 2022.
So it's not just an American company anymore.
Not for a long, long time. This is a machine with moving parts all over the world.
So we have the current picture. Massive revenue, a confusing net loss, and a portfolio of brands that basically runs the world.
Yeah.
But to understand the DNA of this company and perhaps why they are struggling to pivot today, we have to go back.
Way back.
We need to go back to 1946.
We do. To New York City.
The humble hustle. I love this part of the story because it really strips away the glamour. It starts in New York City with Estée and Joseph Lauder. And what blows my mind is that they didn't launch with some massive conglomerate strategy or venture capital.
No, not at all.
They started with just 4 products.
That's right. Just 4. Cleansing oil, skin lotion, super rich all-purpose creme, and creme pack. That was it.
It sounds so simple now. Super rich all-purpose creme. It's very descriptive, very utilitarian. It almost sounds like something you'd buy at a hardware store, not a luxury counter.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But you have to remember the context. This was post-war America. The consumer market was just starting to boom again after years of rationing and austerity. People were hungry for a bit of luxury, but they also wanted things that worked.
And Estée Lauder herself. She was the engine.
She was a marketing genius before the term really existed.
Yeah.
She understood something that modern digital marketers often forget, the power of touch.
The high touch method. I see that term popping up in business schools all the time in relation to her.
Exactly. She famously said, telephone, telegraph, tell woman. She believed that if you put the product on the woman's face, the product would sell itself. She didn't just advertise, she demonstrated.
She's in the trenches.
She was out there on the floor, touching faces, applying creams. She realized that beauty is an intimate transaction. It's not just about selling a product, it's about selling confidence.
And the hustle to get that first department store count. The research mentions they got into Saks Fifth Avenue in 1948. That feels like a huge turning point.
It was the defining moment. You have to understand retail hierarchy, especially in the 1940s. Getting into Saks established the brand as prestige immediately.
So it wasn't a choice, it was a strategy.
It was absolutely a strategy. They weren't selling at the drugstore. They were selling at the most exclusive address in Manhattan.
Mm-hmm.
That single decision set the pricing power and the brand positioning for the next 80 years. It positioned the company as an aspirational luxury player right from the jump.
And there's a famous story about how she got that order, right? Something about accidentally spilling perfume.
That's the legend, yes. The story goes that she went to the Galeries Lafayette in Paris much later. But even in the early days in New York, she was known to accidentally drop a bottle of her Youth Dew bath oil on the floor of a department store.
Accidentally?
Exactly. The scent would waft up. Women would stop and ask what that amazing smell was and demand the product. It forced the store managers to stock it because the customers were literally following their noses.
That is guerrilla marketing at its finest. Before we had viral videos, we had spilled perfume.
It really is. And she pioneered the concept of the gift with purchase. Today, we take it for granted. You buy a lipstick, you get a little makeup bag with samples.
I just assumed that always existed.
Nope. Estée Lauder invented that.
Wait, she invented the free gift?
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
She realized that giving away a free sample wasn't a loss. It was a customer acquisition cost. It got the product into hands, and once they tried it, they came back to buy the full size. It transformed the economics of the beauty counter. It turned a transaction into a relationship.
That's brilliant. Just fundamentally brilliant. And they didn't stay local for long. I was surprised to see how early they went international. Harrods in London by 1960.
Yes, and opening an office in Hong Kong in 1961. Think about that, 1961. Global travel and communication weren't what they are today. We didn't have Zoom. We barely had reliable international phone lines.
So that was a huge risk.
A massive risk. And expanding to Hong Kong that early showed a tremendous amount of foresight regarding the global market, particularly the potential of the Asian consumer, which we will see becomes critical to their finances later on.
Okay, so they have the prestige locations. They have the international footprint. But they also started doing something that I think is the secret sauce of this company. They stopped just being Estée Lauder and started inventing new personalities.
Innovation and diversification.
Yeah.
Precisely. They realized early on that they couldn't just sell one idea of beauty to everyone. They needed to segment the market.
You can't be everything to everyone under one label.
Exactly. If Estée Lauder was the elegant mother, who was the daughter? Who was the husband?
Let's talk about the husband, Aramis, introduced in 1964.
Right. This was a dedicated move into men's grooming and fragrance. At the time, this was a very, very niche market.
And here's a fun fact that I love. The name Aramis isn't just a musketeer reference.
No, it's not. It comes from an exotic Turkish root that was originally used as an aphrodisiac.
No way. That is incredible marketing. Here, splash this aphrodisiac root on your face.
It worked. It created a distinct identity for men, separate from the floral or feminine associations of the main Estée Lauder brand. It gave men permission to care about grooming by packaging it in something masculine and slightly mysterious.
But the real game changer, the one that I feel like everyone knows, is Clinique. 1968. This seems like a massive pivot from luxury creams to hard science.
Clinique was revolutionary.
Right.
Before 1968, skincare was often sold on mystery, allure, and packaging. It was about hope in a jar.
Right, the miracle broth idea.
Exactly. Clinique was sold on dermatology. It was guided by Dr. Norman Orantree. It was fragrance-free. It was allergy-tested. The people at the counters wore lab coats.
The lab coats. I remember that.
It was a whole aesthetic.
It feels very modern, doesn't it? Like that pitch, dermatologist-guided, fragrance-free is exactly what brands are doing today on social media.
It was decades ahead of its time. And consider the risk. Allergy-tested? Sounds clinical, almost medicinal. At the time, beauty was supposed to be romantic, but they bet that women wanted efficacy.
And it worked.
It worked spectacularly. It allowed them to capture a completely different customer, someone who wanted a regimen, who wanted something clean before clean beauty was a buzzword.
And interestingly, Clinique was the first women's cosmetic company to introduce a second line for men, skin supplies for men, in 1976. So they were doubling down on that clinical approach for everyone.
Exactly. They're covering all the bases. High-end luxury with Estée, men with Aramis, science-based skincare with Clinique. It's a portfolio strategy before they even started acquiring other companies.
And then there is this fascinating historical footnote. They entered the Soviet Union in 1981.
Yes. This is where we see the geopolitical ambition of the company. Entering the Iron Curtain in 1981 was not a small feat.
I can't even imagine the logistics of that.
It was incredibly complex.
Yeah.
Most Western brands weren't there. It speaks to a strategy of planting flags in emerging markets long before competitors dare to go.
Yeah.
It established them as a truly global player, not just a Western one.
It's incredible to think about. Okay, so that's the foundation, the origin story. But here's where it gets really interesting. The 1990s. Because up until this point, it's mostly a family business building their own brands from scratch. But in the 90s, the vibe shifts.
The acquisition era begins. And structurally, the company changes forever.
The IPO.
Correct. On November 16, 1995, the Estée Lauder Companies went public on the New York Stock Exchange. The share price was $26, which, if you adjust for splits and inflation, is roughly equivalent to $50 in 2024 terms.
And this is a huge moment. This moved them from a private family fiefdom to a publicly traded organization.
It did, but, and we have to stress this, they didn't lose control.
Right, this is critical.
No, and that's a critical distinction. They implemented a dual-class share structure. We'll get into the gritty details of that later. But essentially, the family kept the shares with the super voting rights. They raised capital from the public, but they kept the steering wheel firmly in their own hands.
So, flush with cash from the IPO, let's talk about the shopping spree. Because instead of just building new brands like Origins, which they launched in 1990, they started buying the competition. And they weren't just buying anyone, they were buying the cool kids.
They were. They realized they couldn't inherently be cool in every demographic. Sometimes, corporate culture is too slow or too polished to create something gritty. So you buy the grit.
And first up is MSC Cosmetics.
The Messi. I remember when MC was the edgy makeup artist brand. It fell underground.
It was the brand for people who were serious about makeup.
Exactly. It was Toronto-based, started by makeup artists, Frank Toscan and Frank Angelo. It was very inclusive, very bold, very viva glam. Estée Lauder made an initial investment in 1994 and fully acquired it by 1998.
So why would MC sell to the establishment?
Scale. Distribution. Supply chain. MAK needed the muscle that only a giant like ELC could provide to go from a niche artist brand to a global powerhouse.
And for ELC, what did they get?
Street cred. It gave them access to a younger, more artistic demographic that would never have walked up to an Estée Lauder counter to buy super rich creme. It was a genius move.
And then Bobbi Brown in 1995.
The natural look revolution. Bobbi Brown was the antithesis of the 80s excess. It was about looking like yourself, only better. ELC saw that trend coming a mile away and just bought it instantly.
And La Mer in 1995, the same year.
The ultimate luxury play. This was a different strategy entirely. They acquired the brand and the original recipe for the miracle broth from the estate of the founder, Max Huber.
So this wasn't about a trend. This was about owning the absolute peak of the luxury mountain.
Exactly. If you wanted the most expensive cream on the market, the status symbol Cream Estée Lauder Companies now owned it. That solidified their hold on the ultra-premium skincare market.
Then Aveda in 1997.
Entry into holistic beauty and hair care. They bought the natural and eco-conscious angle before it was mainstream.
And Jo Malone London in 1999 for Nouche Fragrance.
Right. They realized fragrance was moving away from big blockbuster designer scents and towards more personal boutique experiences, so they bought one of the leaders in that space.
They really just covered every single base in the 90s. It's an incredible portfolio.
They built a portfolio that made them recession-proof in a way. If people weren't buying $300 cream, maybe they were buying a $20 lipstick from Emery. If they weren't into makeup, maybe they bought Aveda shampoo.
It's portfolio theory applied to your bathroom cabinet.
That's the perfect way to put it.
So that brings us into the 2000s and 2010s. The strategy seems to shift again. They keep buying, but now they are chasing trends even harder. They seem almost desperate to stay young.
I think chasing relevance is the right phrase. The market was speeding up. You had the rise of YouTube beauty gurus, then Instagram. The high-touch counter at Saks wasn't where trends were starting anymore. They were starting online.
So they buy Smashbox in 2010.
A studio-born brand from Los Angeles. Very photocentric. It was designed to look good on camera, which was perfect for the emerging selfie culture.
And then the big one in 2016, Too Faced. They spent $1.45 billion on that.
That was a massive bet. At the time, their largest ever.
And was it worth it?
Well, frankly, in hindsight, it's often debated by analysts. Too Faced was huge on social media. It was fun, pink, unapologetic. It was the antithesis of the Clinique look.
So this was a pure play on social media hype.
Absolutely. It signaled that ELC was willing to pay a massive premium to capture the digital native generation.
And more recently, they bought into the skintellectual movement with Deciem and The Ordinary.
Yes, initially investing in 2021 and completing the acquisition in June 2024. Now, this is a fascinating strategy.
And it feels counterintuitive.
It does. The Ordinary changed the industry by offering active ingredients like niacinamide or hyaluronic acid at rock-bottom prices.
$6, $7 a bottle.
Right. This completely undercut the entire luxury market's model of selling you a fancy cream for $100 with a tiny amount of that same ingredient.
So why buy them? Isn't that cannibalizing your own sales?
That's a defensive acquisition. If you can't beat them, buy them. By owning The Ordinary, ELC essentially bought the disruption that was threatening their high-margin brands. They capture the customer at the entry-level price point, hoping to trade them up to Clinique or Estée Lauder later.
It's like a gateway drug for skincare.
That's a cynical way to put it, but from a business perspective, yes. And they did the same with K-Beauty by buying Dr. Jart Plus in 2019, the pioneers of BB cream.
So they're just constantly looking for where the heat is.
Exactly, whether it's Korea, social media, or ingredient transparency.
But then we have to talk about the crown jewel of luxury acquisitions, the Tom Ford deal.
The luxury capstone, announced in November 2022.
$2.8 billion. That is a serious chunk of change.
It is. But think about what they bought. Tom Ford isn't just a beauty brand. It's a global fashion house. By acquiring the brand, they secured the rights to the Tom Ford beauty line, which is incredibly profitable, especially the fragrances like Black Orchid.
Which they already had the license for, right?
They had the license, yes. But licenses expire. This was about owning it forever. And they also took ownership of the intellectual property of a major luxury house.
So they own the name Tom Ford now, even the suits.
They own the brand trademark. Now, the structure of the deal was very clever. They licensed the fashion back to Zegna Group to handle the suits and clothes, and they kept the beauty for themselves.
Ah, so they control the high margin part.
It's a brilliant, asset-light way to control the high-margin part of the business, beauty fragrance, while letting experts handle the low-margin, high-complexity part, manufacturing suits.
So they've assembled this empire. They own the high end, the low end, the science, the fun, the hair, the skin. You would think they would be printing money.
Well, they generate revenue, certainly. But as we mentioned at the top, the modern era, specifically looking at 2024 through 2026, has been rocky.
Let's get into that. Section 3, the modern era and the financial landscape. Because there's been a changing of the guard, hasn't there?
Huge leadership changes. Fabrizio Freda, who was the CEO from 2009 all the way through 2024, stepped down. He was the architect of that massive growth period we just discussed. He turned ELC into a stock market darling for a decade.
And who is running the ship now?
As of 2025, the new president and CEO is Stéphane de la Faverie. He's a veteran of the company, a former executive group president who oversaw Estée Lauder and Aron.
So it's an internal promotion.
It is, which signals they want someone who understands the complex machinery of the company rather than an outsider coming in to slash and burn. They want stability.
But we have to address the elephant in the room, or perhaps the elephant in the boardroom, the Lauder family.
You cannot separate the company from the family. Even in 2026, the Lauder family still owns about 38% of the total equity. But here is the kicker. They control 86% of the voting power.
86%. Let's just sit with that for a second. So basically, what the family wants happens.
Effectively, yes. William P. Lauder is the chairman of the board. This dual-class stock structure means that while it is a public company, it is governed like a kingdom.
What are the pros and cons of that? Because it seems like a double-edged sword.
It absolutely is. The pro is long-term thinking. They aren't just looking at the next quarter, they're looking at the next generation. They protect the brand equity from short-term activist investors.
And the con?
A con is a potential lack of agility. It can make it harder to pivot quickly when the market demands radical change or to remove leadership that isn't performing. It can create an environment where legacy can sometimes trump innovation.
And radical change might be needed. If we connect this to the bigger picture, let's look at that 2025 financial report again. Revenue, $14.3 billion. Operating income loss, $785 million. Net loss, $1.1 billion. What is driving this? Is it just that people aren't buying makeup?
It's more complex than that. It's a combination of three big things. First, operating costs and restructuring. They're spending money to streamline the business. Closing underperforming stores, laying people off, that costs money up front.
You have to spend money to save money.
In theory. Second, something called goodwill impairment.
Okay, can you explain that in plain English?
Sure. Remember those big acquisitions? Too Faced for $1.45 billion, Dr. Jart, Plus A. When you buy a company, a lot of the price you pay is for the goodwill, the brand name, the reputation. It's an intangible asset on your books.
Got it.
If those brands stop performing as well as you projected when you bought them, accounting rules say you have to admit the brand isn't worth what you paid for it. You have to write down the value of that goodwill. And that write-down counts as a loss on your income statement.
So the shopping spree is coming back to bite them a little bit? Some of those big bets aren't paying off as expected?
Precisely. And the third factor, and this is a huge one, is the travel retail slump.
Duty-free shops.
Yes. ELC was heavily dependent on duty-free sales, particularly in Asia. The Daegu market personal shoppers in places like Korea buying beauty products in bulk to resell in China, that market basically collapsed due to new regulations and the economic cooling in China.
I mean, that was a massive profit engine for them.
Massive. And it just sputtered out.
So the stock price reflects this.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Remember, the IPO was $26. Well, while it soared to over $300 at its peak a few years ago, the current financial challenges have put significant pressure on their valuation. It's been a painful correction for investors.
So how are they trying to fix it? They aren't just sitting there losing $1 billion, right? There has to be a plan.
No, of course not. They are pivoting. And the strategy seems to be twofold: technology and emerging markets.
Let's talk about the tech. October 2024, they opened something called the Global Fragrance Atelier in Paris.
This is fascinating. It's located in La Maison des Parfums. It's an AI-enabled innovation hub.
AI perfume, how does that even work?
Essentially, they're using artificial intelligence to analyze decades of fragrance formulas, global scent trends, ingredient combinations, and consumer preferences at a speed no human nose could ever match.
So it tells the perfumer, hey, people in Brazil are really into notes of vanilla and cedar right now.
Exactly that, but on a much more complex level. They are trying to marry the artistry of French perfumery, the nose, with the data analysis of AI. It shows they're trying to innovate their way out of the slump by creating blockbusters faster and with a higher chance of success.
And then the second part of the strategy, emerging markets. I saw a note here about December 2025.
Yes, they announced they are taking minority stakes in brands across China, Mexico, and India.
Now, they had already dipped their toes in India with Forest Essentials back in 2014, right?
They did, buying a minority stake in that Ayurvedic luxury brand.
Uh-huh.
But this new push in 2025 is more aggressive and broader. They are targeting the growing middle class in these specific regions.
So they've realized something.
They realize that growth isn't going to come from selling more Clinique in a mall in Ohio. That market is saturated.
Right.
The growth is going to come from selling local, culturally relevant brands in Mumbai, Mexico City, and Shanghai. It's a hyper-local strategy on a global scale.
Instead of forcing Western beauty standards on the world.
They are investing in the local definitions of beauty. It's a much smarter, more sustainable approach for the next decade.
No, we can't talk about a beauty company without talking about marketing. And for Estée Lauder, that means the face.
The face is iconic, the Estée Lauder woman.
From the past to what we see today, it's been quite a journey. It used to be very specific. Karen Graham, Elizabeth Hurley, Very polished, very wealthy looking.
Very aspirational in a traditional Western aristocratic sense. It was about old money glamour. But the evolution of the face mirrors the evolution of cultural standards of beauty.
Right. I mean, signing Kendall Jenner in 2015 was a huge moment.
That was the bridge to the Instagram generation.
Yeah,
Before Kendall, Estée Lauder felt like your mother's brand.
it did.
Kendall made it relevant to the girl browsing her phone. It was controversial at the time. Purists hated it, but it brought in the numbers. It was a purely commercial decision.
Well, they didn't stop there. The diversity push has been significant.
And necessary. Absolutely necessary for a global brand. They signed Leah Kabede as the first African face. They brought on Lu Wen, Joan Smalls. These weren't just token nods. These were major global campaigns. They needed the face of the brand to actually look like the customers they were selling to globally.
And recently, the ambassadors have become even more interesting. Amanda Gorman,
Yeah.
the poet.
Yes. That signals a shift from just visual beauty to substance and intellect. It's a very smart move. Saying smart is beautiful.
And then the K-Wave.
The K-Wave. Capturing the massive influence of Asian pop culture, they announced IU as the first Korean global brand ambassador in 2024.
IU is huge. That connects directly back to that Asian market strategy we talked about.
It's a very calculated move to leverage the Halley global phenomenon. If IU uses a serum, it sells out in Seoul, Tokyo, and increasingly Los Angeles.
Now, running a company this big isn't always about glamorous photo shoots. Sometimes crisis strikes. And we have to look at how they handled the big one, COVID-19.
August 2020. A very difficult time. Remember, this is a company built on department stores. When the malls closed, their revenue tap turned off.
Their whole business model was threatened overnight.
Completely. The company had to make some hard choices. They cut between 1,500 and 2,000 jobs. That was about 3% of their workforce.
And they closed stores.
10 to 15% of their standalone stores. Yeah. They realized that the foot traffic just wasn't coming back the same way, so they had to aggressively pivot to digital operations. It was a painful but necessary correction to survive the pandemic. It forced them to accelerate their e-commerce capabilities by about 5 years in the span of 5 months.
Speaking of operations, I want to briefly shout out a name that popped up in the research. Jeanette Sarkeesian-Wagner.
Ah, yes, an unsung hero of the operational side.
She was the one who really opened up those difficult markets in the 80s and 90s, right? The Iron Curtain.
Correct. As head of international operations, she was pivotal in getting Estée Lauder into the USSR and China when those doors were just barely cracking open. Under her watch, the international division went from a small side project to generating half the company's revenue.
It's a good reminder.
It is. A reminder that behind the famous faces like Kendall Jenner, there are incredibly sharp business operators making this machine run.
Absolutely. But talking about the machine running, sometimes the machine runs into trouble. We need to move into Section 5, controversies and challenges. Because you don't get to be a $14 billion company without stepping on some toes or facing some ethical dilemmas.
That is unfortunately true. When you operate at this scale, ethical consistency becomes very, very difficult to maintain across every single market and supplier.
The biggest one that always seems to come up in the beauty community is animal testing.
This is a major tension point, a real thorn in their side. Estée Lauder Companies owns brands like Aveda and Smashbox that built their reputations on being cruelty-free.
That's their whole identity.
It is. They market themselves heavily on not testing on animals. But the parent corporation sells other brands in mainland China. And historically, the Chinese government has required animal testing for many cosmetic products to be sold in the country. This is called post-market surveillance or entry testing.
So, if you are a consumer who buys Aveda because you love animals, but Aveda is owned by a parent company that pays for animal testing in China for its other products, or even for Aveda products sold there, it's a contradiction.
It creates a massive ethical gray area for the consumer. ELC states they perform non-animal testing where possible and advocate for alternative methods globally, but they comply with local laws where required. For a purist, that compliance is a deal breaker.
No way around it.
For a pragmatist, they might argue that being in the market allows them to influence the Chinese government to change the laws, which, to be fair, China has started to do recently, slowly phasing out some of those requirements.
It's complicated. Then there was the child labor issue. This was back in 2001.
This was a disturbing report involving a contract manufacturer in New York, of all places, making products for their Origins brand.
What happened?
It turned out the manufacturer, a company called Common Sense Natural Soap and Body Care, was owned by a group led by a cult leader, and children were found working in the factory.
That is horrifying.
Well,
How did ELC respond?
they terminated the contract immediately. They stated they were totally unaware of the conditions prior to the inspection. But it highlights the risks of complex supply chains. Even if you are a massive company, if you outsource manufacturing, you are vulnerable to the bad practices of your partners. It was a wake-up call for the industry regarding auditing suppliers.
There are also geopolitical issues. We mentioned the family's strong influence. That has led to boycotts.
Yes, since at least 2001, there have been boycott campaigns led by pro-Palestine activists. This is largely due to Ronald Lauders, one of the key family members and son of Estée, and his very public, very significant pro-Israel activities and political stances.
And again, we aren't taking a side here on the conflict itself, but it's important to note that for a global brand, the political activities of its owners can have a direct impact on consumer sentiment.
Absolutely. In a polarized world, the family aspect of a family-controlled business becomes a liability as much as an asset. When the name on the building is the same as the name on the political donation, consumers connect those dots.
And briefly, SOPA, the Stop Online Piracy Act.
Right, the Internet Freedom Controversy. The ELC appeared on lists of companies supporting SOPA back in the day. Critics felt the bill was overreaching and would harm internet freedom. It didn't sit well with the younger digital native audience they were trying to court with brands like MAC and Smashbox.
A real disconnect.
It showed a disconnect between the corporate lawyers and the marketing department for sure.
It seems like they're constantly walking a tightrope. But we can't finish without talking about the other side of their impact, the positive side, the pink ribbon.
You really can't tell the story of Estée Lauder without the breast cancer awareness campaign. It's part of their DNA now.
I think people forget that the pink ribbon didn't just appear out of nowhere. It was launched in October 1992 by Evelyn Lauder,
Estée's daughter-in-law. She co-created the ribbon with Self magazine. And you have to remember, back then, breast cancer was spoken about in hushed tones. It wasn't a public conversation.
It was stigmatized.
Very much so. This campaign helped bring it into the light.
And the impact has been undeniable.
It has. They have raised over $89 million globally for research, education, and medical services. And what's impressive is how they mobilized the entire portfolio. It wasn't just an Estée Lauder brand initiative. It united all 19 of their brands at the time.
That's powerful.
It is. Whether you were at a Clinique counter or buying La Mer, you saw that ribbon. It's arguably one of the most successful corporate social responsibility campaigns in history. It changed the culture surrounding the disease.
So we have covered a lot of ground here, from 4 creams in a kitchen in 1946 to an AI fragrance lab in Paris in 2024. From a net loss of $1.1 billion to a charitable impact of $89 million. So what does this all mean? Where does this leave them?
We are looking at a company at a crossroads. That is the only way to describe it.
How so?
They have the legacy. They have the moat of these incredible brands, Tom Ford, La Mer, Amaze Command. Those names aren't going away. They have brand equity that takes decades to build. That's their strength. But they are facing a financial reality that is harsh. Losing $1 billion is a wake-up call. The travel retail bubble has burst. The department store model is fading.
And the market is changing faster than ever.
Exactly. They are trying to pivot with this hyper-localization in India and Mexico and this investment in AI. But the question remains, can a company that is still 86% controlled by the founding family truly be agile enough?
Right. Can you really disrupt yourself when your primary mission might be protecting a legacy?
Or will they just rely on their old playbook?
Yeah.
Waiting for someone else to innovate, and then buying them. They bought the cool with Aunt Bath, they bought the science with The Ordinary, they bought the luxury with Tom Ford. But at a certain point, can you buy your way out of every problem? Or do you eventually run out of money to buy the solution?
That is the big question. With the new CEO, Stéphane de la Faverie, taking the helm in 2025 and the family still holding the keys, the next 5 years will determine if ELC remains the undisputed beauty behemoth or if it starts to show its age.
It's going to be a fascinating watch for anyone interested in business, branding, or, just lipstick.
So here is my challenge to you, the listener. Go to your vanity table. Go to your bathroom. Look at the labels. Flip them over. See how many of them trace back to the General Motors building in New York. You might be surprised to find that your indie favorite is actually part of the empire.
It's a good exercise in realizing just how consolidated the world of beauty really is.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Estée Lauder Companies. We will catch you on the next one.